All right, welcome to the second edition of On My Couch, or what we call Wapta. And it's a 30-minute vidcast. Originally, I call it vidcast because you can watch it wherever you want, or maybe just listen to it. So this is where Sue and myself ask people who are much smarter than us some really key questions about a particular topic. And the intent is we want to learn more, and we want to sort of bring it to life in the work that we do. So my name's Damien. I'm the owner of OMC Group, and what we do at OMC Group is we work with individuals and teams and organisations to affect change. My expertise is org development, capability, learning and development, and also change management and culture. Sue's my co-host. So Sue's a bit of a marketing guru, marketing specialist, a seasoned practitioner with broad capabilities, including strategy development and also execution, and leading multidisciplinary teams as well. So today our guest is Jo Clancy. So I'll introduce Jo shortly. But before we do that, always like to start off with achievement. So Sue, what's been your achievement since we were last together?
So I have been re-elected as chairperson of Life Education Australia, which I'm really pleased to do. It's my third term as chairperson, and Life Education is for those people that may not know. They generally know about Healthy Harold. So Healthy Harold is our hero, and we go out to schools and talk to students about their lives and their bodies and making really good decisions and health decisions through education. So yeah, that's my achievement for the month.
Wow, that's a great achievement. Jo, what about yours? We'll introduce you with your bio in a minute, but your achievement?
Yeah, well, as I was just saying to you before, it's really adjusting to the reopening with the festive season, and for the first time having two teenagers at home but not doing their own schooling. So I've managed to pull off remote work, and while we're also opening up and trying to avoid becoming a glorified Uber service for those kids. So I've instituted a mobile as a service kind of policy at our house, that first of all, can you walk there? Can you ride there? Can you get public transport there? Or can you just not go? Because it was starting to creep in and affect my remote working day. So I've just instituted that policy this week. Things are going a little bit better.
Okay, good. And mine is I'm running a half marathon on Sunday. So
Sunday.
I'm doing an early plug for my achievement. My achievement will be finishing that and being alive at the end of it. So
you're tapering at the moment.
That's consistently the part of the training program that I do very well. Is tapering. It's the stuff before tapering. I'm not good for that. Yes. Yeah. All right, cool. So thank you for that. It's always good to just work out, just to do a bit of a reflection around, achievements and what's important to us. So, and Jo, thank you for joining us for our second On My Couch. So we're all on our respective couches. So, and the intent, as I said, is really about sort of having an informal discussion, learning around a particular topic, and then sort of hopefully exploring it, unpacking it, and then we can apply it in our own businesses. So Jo, your expertise in sensational, so a strategy and service design facilitator, known for futures design thinking, and you help leaders imagine the design value change for their customers, for their stakeholders, and their people. As a consultant, Jo's worked with boards and executive teams on developing future-focused strategy, and partnered with non-for-profit and community service organisations to build capability for customer-centric service design and lead innovation. And Jo and you and I have worked together a couple of times on different programs, and we integrate growth mindset and service design. So I'm familiar with the concepts, familiar with the application, but I was really keen to get you on our couch and learn more about some of the techniques and the approach, and a little bit behind the why of service design. So it's great to have you here, Jo. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So Jo, after that fabulous introduction that Damien's almost probably stolen a lot of your key points, let's start with your why and give us the Jo Clancy story.
Yeah, so 5 years ago, I was fortunate to be able to go on an innovation study tour across the globe to Silicon Valley. And, it was run by an Australian expat who's really well connected over there. So we were able to get in and talk to senior and executive leaders at Tesla, Airbnb, Google, Twitter, and even some of these global innovators, absolutely known for their talents around service design and innovation. So it was, and I really also got to observe the way that they worked. So you can't translate the culture of Silicon Valley into the Australian context, and nor would you want to, because we know that, there's some things about that culture that even we've seen in the last 5 years have resulted in some of the issues we've seen around privacy and security and so forth. But putting that aside, there are a couple of things that really blew me away about that experience. So one was their ways of working, their discipline around the way that they run meetings, progress decisions, and have an obsessive drive around value for the customer and aligning that with business outcomes. And the second thing was how they build this culture in which innovation thrives in teams and in the organisation and right across the organisation. So I came back and started to think about, also the methodologies that drove that, which were design thinking, using lean business testing, and agile, and the best of agile. And so I crafted did a presentation at Public Sector Week in 2017. And I have to say that from there, I kind of went speaker viral. So I ended up doing about 25 plus presentations across, teams and organizations in boardrooms and at conferences. And I really realized and tapped into an appetite and a demand for organizations to really uplift their capability around these new ways of working, that around customer value and being really productive and collaborative. And so from that, I founded the adaptability factor, which, adaptability is the big word, and it's really about adapting the best of what we've seen from those global innovators into our Australian context. But also the vision is around adaptability as well. So empowering leaders, teams and organisations to adapt in a new age of change by using these new ways of working. And as we've discovered, Damien, as well, combining it in with the growth culture that allows innovation to thrive.
It's interesting when people talk about innovation. I heard a great definition of what innovation is, because I think it's one of those words that people throw around a lot. We've got to be innovative. We've got to think differently. And the definition that I read was that innovation is change that adds value. And I think that really summed up what you were just talking through then. It's actually got to add value, and it's got to be solving a problem or an opportunity with the customer at the core. So I suppose if we reflect on the last 2 years, it's probably, has anything changed, or has it become more important, or where do you see the impact of the last 2 years on your subject matter expertise?
Yeah, so that's right. What is service design and why is it important right now? So Susan, you're exactly right. Lots of people think about service design and innovation as, it's like all about ideation. It's all about having the best ideas and coming up with this great, amazing idea. But actually, it's all about, it's a bit of a discipline, and it's doing the research and putting the customers at the center. But then it's going into not only just design thinking, but design doing. Because you're not going to get any impact by knowing more about the customer. You've got to do something with that. And I think over the last, design thinking initially started off with a bit of a singular focus on the customer as the end user. But actually what we've seen in the last couple of years is that it's now proliferating to really be also about the ecosystem in which we deliver those products and services that wraps around the customer. So it's not enough to just be obsessed around customer. You've also got to leverage the system and think about, either your third-party providers or your stakeholders in the system, or your value chain or your supply chain in the system, to be able to really line up the customer value with your business outcomes and wrapped around the leverage of the system as well. So also in this sort of pandemic and the way that our working lives have changed, it used to be all about, I remember they've had this mantra in Silicon Valley about get out of the building, which was about, connecting to what was happening in the service on the ground and also connecting into the external system. But in the last 2 years, we haven't even been able to get in the building, let alone get out of it. So we're out of the building, but we're actually being less connected and less, able to observe that system than we ever have been. So I think there's an opportunity and a challenge in how we're moving forward now with the hybrid ways of working, to how do we use this discipline and these methodologies to really power up very genuine connection and collaboration when we're on site in buildings, like across teams, and also how to linking back into the external system. And then how do we, cycle back into the productivity that we've gained from remote working? So I think that's the new frontier for my business, and I think for innovation service design. How does it help teams work in a hybrid model around that, getting the best of the on-site connection and collaboration, but also using the virtual tools that we've now kind of, all embraced to power sort of that productivity when we're working remotely as well.
And so, just picking up on one of the things that you talked about was around sort of that focus on the customer. I mean, one of the things that I've heard when we've worked together, you've been making sure we have a really razor sharp focus on the customers. So, and if you talk to most businesses, they'll say we've got some good insights in our customer. So how does service design help you have even greater insights into the customer? That razor focus.
Yeah, so but I think it does give you like that first discovery mode, and doing the research and getting those amazing insights is really important. But the service design is actually all about the next step, which is how do you use those insights to actually enact change and then get impact and measure that.
Yeah.
And so for me, recently it's all about, because I think one of the pitfalls of design thinking and service design is that organisations can take too long in that initial discovery and insight phase, because it's fun and it's really, teams really get into it. But we can be at risk of just admiring the customer journey maps, that's fancy ones that sit up on the wall, and sit back and go, oh, what an amazing insight. But actually what we need to be doing is moving quickly into actually taking our ideas into testing, because it's about checking our assumptions and biases about those ideas and how they're landing for the customer. We've got the example, Damien, of a recent client we worked with where we did all that initial discovery phase, got our 2 ideas that we're going to take into testing. And I remember that one of the ideas was like a favourite child. It was like the sexy data and analytics report that was going to be put in front of the customer, and they were really excited about it. The other idea was actually a really basic idea. It was this cut sheet that was actually like it was an Excel spreadsheet, but it had this information about the journey the customer was taking with our client. Yeah. And, they kind of started off like this. And then as they went into testing, it kind of went like this. The new exciting idea actually felt quite flat for the customers. They sort of went, meh, not too sure about that. The cut sheet, the very basic cut sheet, that just was a phenomenal success. And it then went on to be a foundation for our next phase with that client in terms of sprouting another 5 new service designs on top of that. And customers actually referenced that cut sheet in the NPS results that came around the next time. So it just goes to show that service design is a great check on your assumptions and biases and what will actually deliver value for your customers.
I think that's a really good point. That was the sort of the key takeaways. Like we're all passionate. We all think we know what our customers want, but I think that the beauty of the discipline, and I love the way you're talking about it, it's the discipline, it's the action, actually then to actually confirms what it is, because we all have our passion projects, right? But it's great. But if we're the only person that loves that project, then it's not going to be a viable product or a viable service going forward. So.
Yeah. And so get those ideas into testing as soon as you can, into the real world, get that clear and direct feedback from your customers, and also from your stakeholders in the system as well, and how it actually works in the system. And then use that to keep powering your discovery and your insights. So I think sometimes we sort of go a bit linear and we get stuck a bit in those early stages.
Okay.
I read recently this week, someone said about, it was in relation to digital, and I wouldn't mind just asking some questions about that as well. But they said that you actually should write a media release for the product or the service that you're going to implement, and try and then articulate what are the benefits. And if you can't write them down and you can't explain them within an A4 sheet, then it probably hasn't got it's not going to have the power that you thought the idea might have, which is your point about falling in love with an idea and then realizing actually the other one is much better. But on the digital side, how do you see the sort of, again, if COVID's done one thing, it's accelerated our whole digital use, aka us being on the screens now, but your phone, your QR code, even the most untech person can work a QR code now and knows how to show their vax certificate and what have you. How has that sort of impacted the thinking and the process that you go through?
Yeah, absolutely. So, all the clients I work with now, they all say it has completely advanced their digital transformation. But what is happening is that there's lots of services being digitized, but what we need to do is still think about service design as a discipline, to step back and look at the digital service in terms of it's the other channels and touch points in the way that a customer interacts with an organization. Because now we've sort of, lots of organizations are finding digital, but actually it's the connections that they have with when it doesn't, so a customer is troubleshooting or problem solving, it's how does that connect to the phone channel or the face-to-face channels and the other touch points with the organization. So looking back and actually taking the perspective of a customer journey and how the digital service actually has interfaces and interconnections with the other interactions that the customer has with an organization. I think that's the new, where we need to go next is now iterating and improving the whole experience, not just the digital side. I think that's what organizations are grappling with, because it's been a fast and furious digitize as much as we can out of necessity. Now it's about how do you take all of that and actually identify the pain points for the customer and for the business in terms of bringing those together and continually innovating to make the whole experience a better quality, better impact for customers and for the business and for stakeholders in the system.
Cool. Terrific, Jo. So I think that you've done a great job in terms of just painting the picture around what you do, service design and innovation. So a couple of questions both from Sue and myself, just to unpack it a little bit more. So it sounds sensational, right, in terms of the really understanding your customer, coming up with a viable proposition that's really going to work for them. So that's great. From your experience, what are the barriers to success? What gets in the way?
So I think, Damien, as we've talked about, it's not just a skill set. It's not just about having the methods and the tools and the techniques are really good, but it's also about our mindset in what you bring to how you apply those tools and techniques. So it's empowering and motivating your whole team to embrace ambiguity, to be open in terms of checking those assumptions and biases, to be curious, to go out and to try not to boil the ocean or build all the bells and whistles into the idea that you fall in love with, Sue, what you were talking about before, to create this big thing before you get it out there for actually seeing, it's almost like test one feature at a time, rather than sort of avoid sort of building it all and then getting it out there and, setting and forgetting. You want to do a minimum viable product or service, get it out one feature at a time and keep iterating and improving it as you get that direct feedback from your customers and stakeholders.
And I think that was a key point that we had when we worked together with the couple of programs, that mindset. That's a really important part to sort of how do you make sure that people within the organisation are open to, hey, this thing that I've been doing for the last 5 or 10 years that I love doing actually may not be the right way of doing it. And that's a to get yourself into that sort of mindset can be really challenging.
And how lean can you go? Like you start off small scale, low cost, low commitment. What's the most minimal way that you can test your idea out there with customers in the system to learn about it before you then scale it across, broader parts of the system and with more customers.
Yeah. Cool.
Resisting that temptation. Learning before you scale. Test, learn, scale. It's that really lean business testing approach.
But I suppose ultimately someone's going to have to sign the checkbook or pay for this. So there's one thing to start with a lean model and work it up, but how do you structure your ROI around the program that you're developing? Because you're right, there's going to be multiple iterations and it might fail. So what does the business proposition look like?
So what I love about lean business testing is that you collect data on it as you go. So rather than you're estimating your benefits through just your, what do we think, or based on past experience, you are going out, you're testing in real experience, collecting the data that you can then use to extrapolate out to modelling and forecasting so that you get this much better basis for your estimates in a business case. So, I think it's got such good application for actually building up to getting the investment that you need from your senior and executive leaders by showing them how it works in small scale, getting the data that provides the evidence behind how you're forecasting and modelling the impact it's going to have at a larger scale.
Yeah. Just curious, maybe it's sort of a focused area that I'm thinking about is around. So I do a lot of work in the service industry. So how do you talk about what we've been talking about with people that are in the service industry that already do deliver a really good service, that have a great NPS or customer experience? I mean, how do you position service design and minimal viable proposition and the like? How do you what's the benefit? We're already a really good service organisation. How does this help us?
I think, you can be really good today, but as we are all experiencing with the pace of change that's going on for your organisation and externally, you need to be continually getting that customer insight and that customer feedback in order to keep up with the changing expectations and demands of your customers, to keep going from good to great. Otherwise, you can be at risk, I think, of just being a bit complacent. We're really good at what we do. We've got a handle on what our customers need and want. But as things change, are you really keeping up with that change, the changing needs and wants of your customers? That's a continual innovation, demand and process that I'm thinking you want to keep delivering exceptional services. It's having that closed loop process, where you're getting the insight, you're enacting that, taking action on that insight and continually innovating and improving, rather than like a big transformation, that incremental constant kind of innovation. And I think a service design loop of kind of how you do your critical thinking, your creative thinking about getting the continued value for your customers.
Okay. Cool.
For me, that's what it is. You can be good now, but you in order to keep up, you've got to, it's really good to have this discipline around how you actually apply what you're learning about your customers.
And Jo, in terms of sort of process, if you, what does it look like for a client? What are the steps that you work through them with, and where do you engage in the organisation? Is it with the HR department, or is it with the engineering or the technical people, marketing? Where do you sort of position, and how do you start?
So my favourite way of working with organisations is to partner and to learn while we work. So we learn while we apply the methods to work on actual business problems. And that's certainly what's been successful in the programs we've been running with OMC Group. So it's, taking the tools, the methods, and creating them into a, uplift of capability while we actually apply it, working on an actual business design problem and challenge. And so working in partnership with mostly with leaders and actually running design sort of sprints where you bring cross-functional teams together in the organisation and you get people experiencing what the methods and the techniques look and feel like in practice while you solve a business problem. And then as you go through and you're designing the new services, you bringing in that storytelling to then be able to, you know, communicate that across the organisation and get some traction, so that, you know, service design starts to become more readily understood and imagined within the organisation through a real application and through some real stories from customers, from people in the system, from employees. They are able to become the change champions for the organisation into why these methods, tools and techniques, and then and how they power up a different culture as well, to, you know, why it's having the impact that it's having.
And that was our experience, wasn't it, Jo? So we started within the service delivery team, really built some positive momentum and some traction there.
Yeah.
Then sort of filtered out into the, you know,
other parts of the organisation. Yeah. And, you know, and I think we also we've created a toolkit that had the basic kind of templates and tools, but then we make sure that we integrated it. Where I have most success is where it gets integrated into the existing processes and systems in the organisation. So don't create this innovation process that sits over as a distinct, you know, process over here. It's got to be integrated in how that they work day to day, week to week, integrated into the way they measure the impact and success of those initiatives. So it's, you know, constantly being the toolkit is constantly being customized and integrated into the existing business. That's another factor of success, don't you think, Damien?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely, yeah, I think absolutely. So it's actually then it moves from a program to this is how we do things around here.
Around here, yeah, and with then the culture that underpins and supports it as well. So we work a lot with leaders and even frontline champions as well around how do we change our behaviours, how do we think about values, how do we think about rituals and the way that we check in and check out each week, the way that we work as a collaborative team. So bringing in some of those really good agile methods, you know, how do we dial in so those agile retrospectives so that we're stopping as a team, reflecting and learning and looking back about what, you know, where we've come and where we need to go next, continually innovating as a team, working on ourselves as a team as well as delivering the value for our customers.
Okay. What other organisations have you worked with, or what sort of industries, I suppose, and how applicable is this across industry categories?
Yeah, the short answer is it is applicable across every industry. But I did start mainly in public sector organisations because, you know, with that recent digital transformation, we've needed to really step back and sort of look at service design across the whole, because that's what I'm finding. Some of the legacy systems and the way that, you know, we have multiple touch points within a public sector organisation means you need to think about service design, not just in a digital aspect, but all touch points and interactions. But I'm proliferating into the private sector as well, because it's still also about the whole experience for a customer and getting, you know, the really fast runs on the board, but marrying up the customer value with the business outcome for private sector as well. And then not-for-profit sectors, particularly in health and aged care, really, this, you know, I think there's a real bit of a revolution around patient-centered care in healthcare. And obviously they've had to go hard on innovation as well with the pandemic. And they've really stood up and really, you know, realised that. But now it's about pulling in some of the discipline and the tools and techniques to also help with that, how they've had to really innovate out of necessity.
I guess it's going to be a lot of hybrid models almost out of, we've gone from here to here and now we're going to sort of come back somewhere and be able to cherry pick the best of both.
Best of both. And then how do they work together in cycles? How do you cycle from getting the best out of your on-site collaboration and connection that we're all kind of craving and it's been missing in the last couple of years, but then how do you then still get the most out of the remote working productivity as well, and still continue that focus on customers and connections across the business, even using the virtual tools as well. So that's sort of my next frontier, and some of the programs that I'm now developing is about leading hybrid collaboration, because I think that's our next challenge. It's our next opportunity.
Mm.
Hey, Sue, do you have any more? Do you have another question, top of mind question?
So I suppose I was just thinking, you know, when you think about that hybrid model, at the end of the day, if the customer is at the centre, they don't want to have a great experience physically and digitally. It doesn't really matter to them, and they want to almost be able to have it anytime, any day. And if again,
and for there to be smooth handoffs between those physical phone and digital channels.
Yeah,
I think that's the challenge for organisations now.
Yeah.
You know, how do you
make it seamless? That's the challenge. It's the seamless nature of it all. Because again, you know, as a customer, I don't mind who I'm talking to, where they live or what they do. I just want the outcome that I'm after, not necessarily, you know, whether they're sitting in a building all together or they're independent. It's just knitting it all together, putting it that way.
Yeah. I agree.
Jo, is that someone else that's trying to make a contribution behind you?
Yeah. It's a dog. Yeah. He's agreeing.
Good to have extra support. So, Sue, maybe we might sort of move towards sort of. This has been a really good conversation, Jo. We could probably keep on going, to be honest. So, but normally Sue asks this question, but maybe I'll ask this question. So, you know, opportunity for an unashamed plug. You know, how can Jo Clancy and the adaptability factor help individuals, leaders, and organisations?
Yeah, well, like I said, my next focus is on, you know, the program Leading Hybrid Collaboration. So, and I'm practicing what I preach, Damien. I'm doing a little test and learn, approach to that. So I'm doing a taster session on the 21st of January. So low cost, low commitment for myself and the participants, so that we can learn about what's really going to land for teams and leaders and organisations. So you can, you know, you can find out more about that if you connect with me on LinkedIn and also on my new website. So looking up Jo Clancy and the adaptability factor, and coming in to find out more about leading hybrid collaboration. We've got some really good, there's 4 models that the Gartner organisation has put out, and some papers on that around how you think about, you know, what those models are and when and how to use them effectively. Yeah. So I've sort of built a program around that using some of the service design principles as well.
So, and is that what the taster session is about? Just to explain.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So when is it on again?
21st of January. So it's often a good time to do professional development, if people are around. Some people will be away, but it can be a really good time for others who will be in the office, in terms of, you know, reflecting and thinking about how they want to run their teams and their initiatives and projects throughout the year.
Okay, and to learn more, look at your LinkedIn site.
LinkedIn, and also my website, Jo Clancy or the Adaptability Factor.
Okay,
just launch that. So
cool.
Fantastic.
So Sue, your takeaway from today's conversation, what has Jo got you thinking about? What's the highlight?
I think for me, it was all about stepping back and just making sure that, I thought your beautiful example where you said, oh, here's the shopper journey, isn't it beautiful? And we've done this great picture on the wall and we look at it, but it doesn't actually mean anything. It's just a picture until you actually really understand it and do something with it. So that was sort of my takeout, because I've seen a lot of beautiful customer journey maps in my time, and some of them are really sensational. But I think that the key takeout for me is that is just the beginning. That's not the end.
Yeah.
Yep. And sometimes I don't even take it from the brown paper that you do in the texter and the post-it notes on the wall into the digital versions, because that takes a lot of time. It's actually more important to get on with testing some of the ideas that come out of it.
Yeah.
Design doing just as equally as design thinking.
Yeah. I really like that design doing phrase, and that's the thing that I take away from today's conversation as well, is that sort of that, you know, the benefit that, and, you know, I've worked with you, I've seen, you know, guys measure, and then also that measurement then being able to link back to your existing strategy and your existing metrics, whether they be your NPS scores or your operating expenditure or whatever it is. So plugging it back, you know, that same thing we talked about before, plugging it back into the system as opposed to setting it out as a separate piece. That's been a really great refresh for me for today as well. So,
and being able to let go of the ideas that don't get that measure, don't get that progress or shift in the measures, and really focusing on the ones that are, and scaling and improving those.
Yeah, cool. So Jo, before we wrap up, any final parting words of advice or final comments?
I'll probably just go back to one of my takeouts from my Silicon Valley experience as we lead into 2022, which is going to become a little bit more about, connection and collaboration. And that is that every connection is an opportunity to learn. So I think, now we're going to go into face-to-face and virtual and remote connections. So how do you take every connection you're going to have next year and use it as an opportunity?
Okay, cool. Terrific, Jo. Thank you. That was awesome. As I said, we could keep on going, but I really enjoyed listening to you. Love working with you, and Sue. Thank you. Good to see you again on our couch. Our next down on the couch is going to be in January, and we've actually got Linda Wong, who is from an organisation called Runway. Runway do a lot of work in the startup space. Help to build startup ecosystems, but also then take that learnings and learn with existing organisations. So it's a really nice build in terms of some of the concepts
we've
talked about here, because they use concepts of service design and lean
business testing and agile.
But we'll shift the focus to be more about the startup ecosystem and how we bring that to life within organisations. So looking forward to chatting with Linda. In the meantime, Jo, the Adaptability Factor, LinkedIn on the website. So thank you very much. Sue and I are part of the OMC Group team. So if you want to learn more, feel free to go to our website as well, omcgroup.com.au. But thank you very much, and thanks for being on our couch.
Thank you for having me. Love the opportunity to talk about service design and innovation anytime.
Thanks, Jo.
Thank you.